Things have gotten really bad out there because it does feel like the way you look has never mattered more than it does today. And while people have denied this, it's really important to acknowledge a lot of the aspects of this information that are true. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about why I feel you are a target in society if you look bad, and the harsh truth of lookism that I've seen myself. Really a great way to just kind of look at this and really see the evidence for it is just kind of observing people at work. And it's been a few different times this has been interesting to watch for me. So starting with one position that I worked when I was in my last semester of college, I worked as a Christmas light installer. So I was taking one class to finish my degree. I was working full time, and I also worked remotely, would do that at night, plus called games and covered games on the side. But the layout was like we had 3 or 4 crews about, and there was probably 7 to 10 people on each crew, including the electrician and the manager, and you just go job to job throughout the day, and probably, well, you're really dependent on the day, but it'd be a full normal work day, like 8 to 11 hours maybe. And just for the most part, you were with your crew, but we did hear a lot about this shorter guy that was kind of an interesting character. I worked with him at some sites where we needed multiple crews, but mostly stayed away. But this dude, he was like he was very short, like barely over 5 feet, if that. And he was just super annoying anytime you're around him, just not a really friendly, not the easiest guy to have a conversation with. And the thing was, I think you felt bad because you felt like that was coping. He was trying to make up for, I guess, getting dogged on by everybody, which he did, even if, again, you didn't even work with this person. Like, you just never heard anything good. And it's like every time I spoke with him, again, just felt bad, like he did have some good intentions, but he was super annoying, and I think it just caused everybody to crash out on him. And the difference is, if he was taller and, like, more in shape and had better things going on, I'm sure he could have been a similar personality, annoying, but nobody was going to do this. It got to a point because we had, again, there was other people doing worse work than this guy, but I remember there was one day where I guess he had just ticked off one of the managers so much that he ended up like he was on a ladder. And keep in mind, guys, we are doing some insane work on these ladders. You had the 24-foot ladder, you would go up, be on these shaky Florida palms, which in a lot of them, they could be skinny or the thicker ones, but you were going up also these other branches where the branches would come out and just go in all tight, awkward angles. Your ladder, just totally unsafe 99% of the time. You're not strapped in. This dude is like way up there, which is already dangerous enough, but he's way up there doing this job. And in the middle of that, I know like his manager crashes out because he is trying to finish a limb that he told him not to, and he just goes over there, shakes the ladder, nearly gets this guy to knock off the ladder. Would have been a hospital trip, but he comes down, and it's like, who is getting this kind of treatment if he doesn't look like this, if he's not short, if he's not, he could have been but it's just, you're not going to see that if he wasn't an easy target, if he wasn't short. But I think there was also, another time we were doing a super dangerous job, and I remember I think they sent him up on purpose to do it, or there was a couple of times this happened where if there was a terrible thing, and for the most part it did get split, so I can't 100% say this was all to be correlated, but you would split like who was going up to the highest limbs and the most dangerous stuff throughout the day. And I feel like at times when they would get annoyed, he would just get hit with the worst. And there was one house where at the super rich mansion in southern Florida, this dude goes up the ladder, and you already had as I mentioned, the 24-foot. He's got it full rung, top rung. He's going up on. Plus, it is sitting on a platform that is skinnier than like a foot, maybe like a foot and a half. Imagine of marble, a sliver, and that's the wall of a staircase going down. So if you fall off this ladder, there's an extra like 10 feet plus that you're falling on top of the 24-foot. So you're probably gone. Like, there's a real chance you're just gone if you fall from this. So remember, no harness, no strap. He's up there, and the ladder's also vertical because we needed to get it vertical just to have it stand. And you never want the ladder to be too vertical or too horizontal, or it creates problems with, like, if it's too vertical, you can barely lean back, or if it's too horizontal, obviously the ladder can like slip and grind down the tree. So it was just crazy, and this thing is swaying in the wind, and especially with the tree, and that was just your experience all day on this job. But they sent this dude up there. I was nervous watching that. I remember that. I'm like, I know we don't like this guy, and somebody had to do this, but like, damn, if he falls, it's over. But anyways, we did take that up. He did get the job done, but I was like, I was actually worried too for him because he did have, just a lot of mistakes here and there, I think, with the pressure of being treated wrong, and you're just like, this could go wrong. But he did end up going off the ladder and getting it done. But eventually, yeah, he came to blows so many times with the owners, the managers, even in our crew, which was the one that actually was the last to stay stay out there with the jobs drying up towards Christmas. We stayed out the longest because our crew was apparently the best of like the 4 and kept getting the job. So, he was on our crew because we were doing so well like later on in the season, and just still you couldn't stand being around the guy. And just a lot of that, again, he looked bad, he was short, and perceived as annoying because of those looks. I really think that had a lot to do with it. Another great example of this, just in my observations, was when I worked on the pizza table at a local pizza spot. Just right after high school, literally like I was hired like day after graduation, and I worked this through community college and even when I come home on a break from my 4-year university. But basically it ended up being actually one of the better jobs I worked because there was good management, so that's why I would come back. Although there was still some messed up treatment I got to observe. One of the drivers that worked there was a shorter guy. He was one of the delivery drivers. He was old and bald. He would take the pizzas obviously to the customers, but he really kept to himself for the most part. And I just remember somehow, like, despite that, he would have fights with the boss, caught a lot of gossip from the other drivers and stuff, even though he just never felt like he was going to open up too much. And I remember talking to him, and he had a lot of decent stories. He sounded like a normal guy, but it was just, again, just not the great, probably 5'6", maybe, literally maybe 5'5", short, older white guy, looked exactly like, and this is what a lot of people called him, he looked exactly like Gru from Despicable Me, but the shorter version. Like, that's literally this dude. And he caught a lot of flack. And there was even a girl that at one point that worked there accused him of SA. I don't know. Now, again, that could have happened, and it's like, I'm not saying this, he's the greatest person. I don't know what happened there, but I guess there wasn't any hard evidence to that, so it's like you just can't really speak much more on it. But I think that's just symptomatic of everything. And you just looked at him and like felt bad because it's just at every turn I feel like somebody was looking for a reason to hate this guy, and you'd honestly think the awkward behavior comes from getting treated poorly. And of course, my own experiences in getting treated at work have to really be mentioned, and where it really was hitting me the most was probably my first job when I was a bagger in high school, which was absolutely brutal, guys. I mean, I would get home, you feel like garbage to begin with. I wouldn't eat all day in high school, and then would come home and just spike the crap out of my blood sugar, eating slop for like 30 minutes, and as you guys know, I got all obese there. It was terrible. I was already fat and just got, went from very obese to just extremely obese. But basically in those 30 minutes, I would just waste away doing that, and then head to work after I got off high school, going to work for another 6 hours. Then you'd get off at 10 and go home, get done eating at like 11:30 my slop, and then you have homework to do and the alarm's at 6:30 for the next day. So it's just so bad, the setup. But anyways, all that's important context because I looked bad, I had bad habits. You're not even making any money. I was literally making, after taxes and union dues, $5 an hour. So it's like, who even cares? And I would remember there was a guy that would work at the cashier. You'd work with them obviously in their lane. It just would constantly mock me for my like voice or something, and it really didn't even go, which is the weird part, didn't go after my weight. But I noticed this too, like in transforming, half the time you weren't getting picked on about your weight when I was heavy, but then when I lost the weight, and when I, like now, this just doesn't happen. I don't get random people trying to like poke light fun at me like that about just random stuff. But yeah, I would constantly get, comments about that, or they would find something to really poke me about. Just a couple of coworkers, and specifically again that one cashier, would just always getting on me about, and this would happen too at school. There was a couple of guys that were just always trying to get on me for something. But I do remember, too, speaking of those guys in high school, once I had lost the weight and got to see them again, it was like that treatment went away to where I was getting, picked on or made fun of for stuff that didn't even relate to me being fat, actually, which was the main thing you could legitimately sit there and say and make fun of. But it was almost because I was fat, that's why they were making fun of me for this other stuff that didn't even, they could just, knew I was an easy target. So it's like, your looks definitely matter. And of course, again, losing the weight just makes such a difference. None of that stuff happens anymore, but you see it to even grown adults, like in the ones that I mentioned, the first two stories. And just the greater outlook, I think, when you look at society as a whole, there's a lot of scientific studies, there's social studies about this, that the idea is you look better and you're perceived better, you're treated better, you have better attributions. I mean, you fare better in almost every aspect of life. A lot of the, a couple of common things are like, I think all CEOs are like bosses and stuff. It's like you're over 6 feet tall, you look better, you're just perceived better. It's just the reality of the situation. And people experimenting this to the extreme now in the looks maxing community, they're showcasing, unfortunately, the worst of what this can do. and what you can get away with when you look better. And so I think now there's a little more awareness on it. But of course, this has always been the case to a degree. It's just even worse now. So I think with this issue, like, how do we combat this moving forward? And the brutal reality is, I think, in my opinion, you do really want to work on your looks. You want to improve them in a healthy way so that you see the benefit. I think the mistake to me that people do is they take things too far. They do these hards maxing stuff where you're trying to take your looks or whatever it is to the next level, and you do these extreme drastic measures. But I think if you're at least around average, like, you can do all the somewhat controllable stuff and improve enough to feel like you've actually made good in worthwhile strides. And I think the reason I'm against the most drastic stuff for most people is that you can't comprehend the downsides doing that and what you'll experience later on. I think a good way to see this is bodybuilders too. A lot of them, they get obsessed, they abuse drugs, they do anything to get where they want to go, and they do live a fruitful life early on, but then it just tends to end so much sooner than it should, and it's pretty sad to see. But if you guys have any thoughts on this, definitely let me know, because it is really a tough situation. It's a tough pill to swallow. That's what I like to say. Some people like to say brutal, but I mean, it's the reality is you got to look good. You do have to, be somewhat attractive, somewhat desirable to really get the most out of life. That's just the tough reality of the situation. But I think if you just acknowledge that and you find ways to craft it better, you're going to be getting better results in whatever it is you're trying to do. Otherwise, there's some other brutal things that can happen to you. Look out for the next video, guys. In the meantime, comment below, and also check out the email that I've been posting. Would like to have you send me information there and see if we can just find a way to get more creative here on the channel and involve some other voices.